Greetings, chosen by the Lord. It's not gossip when someone is constantly talking about you. It's sorrow masquerading as dialogue. You see, when people lose the energy that used to make them feel powerful, they tend to become strangely insane. The chosen ones are all too familiar with this scenario. Some people begin to fall apart like a thread from a shoddy sweater the instant you leave. All of a sudden, your name takes center stage in all of their tales. Like a character in their mental soap drama who doesn't get paid, you would think you were paying rent within their skulls because they bring you up so frequently. Most people will not speak this truth aloud. It's not a sign of concern when people continue to discuss you after you've stopped talking. Their inability to mend is the reason. Obsessive rumination is even described by psychologists as an emotional obsession that is frequently brought on by unresolved feelings of inferiority or humiliation. To put it simply, they are still in love with you. You're the reason they're over themselves, and the mayhem starts there. Your calm seems provocative. It sounds like you're insulted by your achievement, a full-blown existential crisis in your absence. Every time they bring up your name, they're admitting that you left an imprint too strong to be removed, even though they aren't even aware of it. It's darkly humorous. The act turns into a psychological carnival as they fabricate more evidence that they are not over you in an attempt to prove they are. Denial spins lies while sporting a clown nose to cover up the pain beneath. Therefore, it's true that everyone is sick of them talking about you. Their preoccupation has turned into who they are, not because you are the issue, and something lyrical occurs as they continue to spin. What was intended to embarrass you ultimately exposes them. Let's dissect this in a ruthless, honest, and nondescript manner, because this is spiritual exposure, not simply gossip. First of all, because you quenched their ego, they continue to utilize your name. It's not admiration when someone continues to mention you long after you've passed away. It is an injury, something inside of them that they didn't even realize was yelling for approval is silenced. In actuality, some people want a sense of superiority in order to feel alive. They thrive on control, competition, and comparison. That cycle was broken by you being the one selected. Their game was not played by you. You didn't respond to their trickery or plead for approval, and their biggest embarrassment resulted from their calm power and silence. You didn't ruin their standing. You shattered their sense of superiority. You deprived them of the part they played in their own fantasy, in which you were viewed as the inferior, the one who required their presence. However, when you left, you demonstrated that you were never beneath them and that you were something they couldn't control. And now, rather than acknowledge that fact, they continue to spread the word about you like a haunting tale. They are attempting to regain the ego you inadvertently destroyed every time they speak of you. They will embellish events, fabricate new ones, and twist existing ones, all to give themselves the impression that they still have authority over your story. But in their hearts, whatever they say is a confession. An admission that you removed their preferred substance, attention-grabbing superiority. They don't despise you. They detest the sense of helplessness they get when they see that you no longer give a damn. Your emotional response is necessary for their ego to survive. In an attempt to entice you back into their storm, they continually bringing up your name in talks. However, the irony is harsh. Their uneasiness becomes more apparent the more they talk. For them, what they refer to as truth about you is actually Therapy. Let them speak then. Their statements demonstrate that your quiet was effective. Their ego now talks in circles, attempting and failing to find calm without you, since you have so successfully silenced it. Second, they are still thinking about the time you outgrew them. Because their thoughts are stuck in the precise instant you left a mark they can't get rid of, some people never really go on. They repeatedly play it again to themselves. That moment revealed a weakness they were unwilling to face, not because you are more important than anyone else. You didn't simply move on when you outgrown them. The narrative they were telling themselves about themselves in your life was destroyed by you. They are now imprisoned, caught in a vicious cycle where your absence is constantly blamed. Every discussion they have about you is an effort to stop time and force you to return to the role they intended you to play, to provide the impression that you should still be under their authority. They mentally reenact the words, actions, and circumstances. They believe they can get back what they lost if they talk about you a lot and go over your past in great detail. They don't realize, though, that your development doesn't fit within their mental framework. Nothing they say or do can reach you now that you've moved on, changed, and left them in the echo of your presence. Their fixation isn't arbitrary. It's a response to their inability to reconcile your past and present selves. Your advancement draws attention to their stagnation, which makes them furious, frustrated, and occasionally afraid. It seems as though they are attempting to use you as a standard they are unable to fulfill in order to escape their own failures every time they bring you up. In their hearts, they are merely attempting to reconstruct a time they never moved past, despite their words, grumblings, and fabrications. In their story, you are not the issue. The reality that doesn't fit into their delusions is you. You went on with a purpose, so they are trapped replaying a defeat that only exists in their imagination. They demonstrate that your absence wasn't merely a loss for them the more they obsess. It was when they understood that you could never be contained by them. Your life progressed while theirs was stopped, going back to the very moment they were unable to keep you. Thirdly, they mistake closure for control. Some people think they can finally achieve closure by dominating the story, which is why they talk about you non-stop. They fail to understand that achieving closure is never about exerting power over another person. It's about moving on and accepting what has already occurred. However, they cannot be accepted. They believe they can regain what they lost if they can manipulate your tale, analyze your behavior, and decipher every word you've ever said. Their desperate attempt to control the past hides their incapacity to cope with reality and keeps them caught in a vicious cycle that only serves to highlight their instability. They are trying to change history to suit them with every word they say about you, to support their viewpoint and provide the impression that you owe them an explanation. They want the world to perceive you through their eyes. They think they may finally feel like the issue concluded on their terms by analyzing your decisions and lives. However, that isn't how life operates. You cannot give someone authority over you merely because they ask for it. And that cannot be altered by any amount of discussion, rumors, or whining. Their obsession is evidence of their inability to embrace your independence. The more they attempt to control your image or shape how others perceive you, the more they show that they are still imprisoned emotionally. They fail to realize that control never equates to closure. It's a fleeting delusion that vanishes as soon as you carry on with your life without apology. Their attempts to control your story serve only as a reminder to themselves and to others that you have moved on, while they are still pursuing a non-existent shadow. They put themselves in a vicious loop of preoccupation and frustration by conflating closure with control. Every discussion about you, every rumor, and every misrepresented tale is an indication that they are unable to let you go from their thoughts, and they wind up revealing more of their insecurity than yours in their quest to control what they can never really possess. The irony is inevitable and incisive. It is more obvious that you have already escaped the more tightly they attempt to grasp on. Fourthly, their resentment cost them their reputation. There comes a time when resentment becomes a personality trait rather than just a feeling. People who can't stop talking about you end up just like that. They initially believe they are correcting the record, alerting others, or exposing you. But eventually their preoccupation begins to seem more like trouble than the truth. People ultimately pick up on the trend, so the more times they mention your name, the less believable they seem. One person is always reliving the same story, being dramatic and bitter. Their desire to harm your reputation ultimately backfires. It tarnishes their reputation. There's a sound to bitterness. No one can pretend to have that tone or desperation for very long. It seeps into their facial expressions, their words, and the way they draw attention to unimportant minutiae. And people notice that. They may remain silent, but they begin to go away in silence. They begin to see that the person talking the most is the one who is still mired in the past. They portray themselves as the unstable one the more they attempt to cast you as the bad one. Obsession becomes self-exposure in this way. They never understand how brittle reputation is. You don't lose everything at once. Slowly, piece by piece, it crumbles. When someone sees your resentment and choose not to believe it, their words start to sound more like confession than reality. That show the wound that never healed, the sorrow and the jealousy. What they intended to use against you ends up being their own downfall. And when you climb silently, unaffected by their clamor, while they spiral, attempting to keep control of your image, that contrast says more than anything they could ever say. Their reputation ultimately suffers, not because you disagreed with them, but rather because their resentment needed an audience, and eventually the audience became weary of the show. Fifth, you were used as a spiritual scapegoat. People start looking for someone to blame when they are unable to keep up with your advancement. And that person usually ends up being you. It was not your intention to become their target. While they remained mired under the weight of their own unresolved feelings, you just moved on. They were compelled to confront aspects of themselves that they had been avoiding because of your advancement. Guilt for previous errors, jealous of their unfulfilled dreams, shame for the mistakes they wouldn't mend. They chose the easy route rather than the difficult one, projecting everything onto you and calling it reality. Their own spiritual struggles are reflected in every word they say and every tale they fabricate. The issue wasn't with you. The reflection was you. You caused them discomfort by thriving because your clarity was too strong for their denial. They are merely trying to convince themselves that your prosperity, tranquility, and development are unworthy, which is why they are always criticizing you, spreading rumors, and becoming fixated on you. They find it easier to blame you for your shortcomings than to acknowledge that they are a part of themselves. This is not a subtle projection. It permeates each and every exchange, post, and discussion. You end up being blamed for emotions they have been disregarding for years. Ironically, they expose themselves more the more they attempt to educate or expose you. The design is very discernible. You happen to be standing in the light when they're fleeing their own shadows. Being their scapegoat is actually a compliment that is disguised as an assault, which is a painful reality. It indicates that you are relocating where they are unable to. You've stepped into a space of spiritual harmony and emotional liberation that reveals the weaknesses in their own basis. All they're doing is showing how helpless they feel in the face of your development, even though they'll talk, make up stories, and obsess, and it gets evident the more they project. The aspect of life they won't fight for within themselves is already yours. They don't miss you, number 6. They miss the strength they possessed when you had self-doubt. When someone can't stop talking about you, it's not because they're missing you. They long for the power they used to have over you. The times when you doubted yourself were when they flourished, when their remarks, deeds, or opinions caused you to doubt your own value. That served as their fuel. That was who they were. Real respect and connection were not the foundation of their sense of power. It was based on your hesitancy, your uncertainty, and your feelings. They lost the foundation of their power when you disengaged and stopped supporting their story. Neither love nor hate is the source of their addiction. It is the result of withdrawal. They understand that the throne they claimed in your imagination was always a fantasy when you stop answering, and your calm no longer matches their turbulence. They were only strong when you gave them permission. Now that your energy has been taken away from them, they feel vulnerable, insignificant, and little. It's a frantic attempt to regain that lost authority every time they bring you up. They make an effort to remind themselves and anybody else who might listen that they still have a part of your tale and that they once influenced you. They fail to see, however, that their fixation merely serves to highlight their lack of control. It's a cruel irony. Their identity was only as strong as the distrust you had for them, and the more loudly they shout, the more obvious it becomes that their authority was never real. They didn't realize that detachment isn't the same as abandonment. It's freedom. You transcended the relationships that previously made them meaningful, and now the person who believed they had the ability to influence your reality is left circling your name in an attempt to hold onto a power that vanished the instant you stopped taking part. Nothing about you is the focus of their obsession. It has to do with the hole you made in their ego. No matter how much they say, they will never be able to fill that gap. Your liberty turned into a mirror for them. Furthermore, it causes them more pain than any absence could. You are their incomplete sentence. Number 7. Some people are stuck on you because you symbolize the portion of their tale that they were unable to finish, not because they are in love. Their delusion of control was disrupted by you, the chapter that ended differently than they had hoped. They believed they could control the result, change your worth, or degrade you into remaining insignificant. You outgrew the plot instead. You left them hanging with a sentence that lacked a period when you left in the middle of the sentence. Since speaking it is the only way they can act as though the story isn't finished, your name is now stuck in their tongue. You stand in for what might happen if they are unable to stop replaying. What if they remained? What if I had prevailed? Could it be that I didn't push them too far? You represent the version of their lives in which they were still important. Since that version is no longer in existence, they attempt to bring it back to life through discussion, rumors, analysis, sympathy, and everything else that keeps you interested in their story. You turned into the poignant reminder that they didn't complete the task they began, a bookmark in their timeline. Something about it is achingly poetic. They are unable to find closure because it necessitates honesty, and being honest would include acknowledging that you were never the issue. They are unable to move on. You did something uncommon, not because you did something incorrectly. The narrative ended the way you wanted it to. You won't allow their pride dictate the last sentence. As a result, they no longer mention you whenever they do. They are discussing their unfulfilled ending. Because it reminds them of the authority they lost, they fill the void with your name. Because the author of that story has already gone on to another book, you became the phrase they keep attempting to finish but are unable to do so. This is not a nostalgic preoccupation. It has to do with unresolved matters. The knowledge that the only person who could provide them with closure has already chosen peace over dialogue is what torments them the most. You broke their psychological hierarchy. Number 8. Being superior to others is the foundation of some people's entire identity. They don't gain their trust. It's derived from the way they make everyone else feel insignificant. They use a ladder to rate the world, and anyone who disagrees with them is viewed as a danger. You did more than simply upset their expectations when you rose without their consent or approval and went about your life on your own terms. The ladder they had painstakingly constructed was destroyed by you. Your development served as proof that their power was brittle and that their superiority was really a flimsy illusion based on control and comparison. They can't stop talking about you because of this. Every reference is an effort to piece together that hierarchy in perception, discourse, and rumors. In an effort to feel superior to you once more, they fabricate tales, scrutinize your behavior, and attempt to minimize your accomplishments. Their confidence was never based on competence or substance, but rather on controlling the narrative, and every word they say is a bandage applied to a wound they don't want to admit. It becomes increasingly clear that their power was never real the more they obsess. They think they have the power to determine where you belong in the world, but the hollowness of their superiority was revealed by your freedom. They now use your name as a shield to act as though the hierarchy is still in place, despite the fact that it is disintegrating beneath them. And the irony is that they keep trying to use you to rebuild themselves. They are making clear just how flimsy their base was. Every insult, rumor, and inflated tale is an attempt to make things better. Your ascent made them face the fact that they stole their self-esteem, and the only way they can even think of getting it back is by constantly talking about you. You just existed, developed, and went on without having to struggle or prove anything. Their fixation is the admission that you destroyed a world based on shaky dominance, evidence that they are frantically trying to put the ladder they relied on to feel superior back together after it crumbled due to you. The 9th is that they are punished for their obsession. When someone can't stop talking about you, a peculiar sort of justice is revealed. It traps the same mouth that attempted to curse your name. What started out as gossip gradually develops into an uncontrollable habit, a recurring pattern in which people repeat your narrative so frequently that it begins to consume them. They broadcast reminders of their diminished influence, even when they believe they are disseminating rumors. The universe maintains equilibrium in a subdued, beautiful manner. It allows them to obsess until their words turn into a prison of their own. It seems like control at first. They believe that by bringing you up they remain relevant, because they can still access your life by discussing it. However, the obsession evolves over time. The hatred in their remarks fades. The thrill wears off. All that remains is coercion, even when it no longer makes sense, a need to bring you up. Silence now feels like erasure because they have so strongly bonded your name to who they are. They are unable to let go because they would have to confront how meaningless their lives would be without that obsession if they stopped talking about you. That's the penalty. They thrive off of their fixation. The very energy they're attempting to flee is simply strengthened by every falsehood, every narrative, and every effort to bring you down. They are exposed by the same moniker they use to make fun of you. People become aware of the trend. How they never stop and you never answer. Everything is revealed by the contrast. Their incessant urge to talk about you turns into a living admission that they haven't moved on while you have. You didn't need to clear your name or seek retribution. Life took care of it for you. Their resentment became their downfall according to the universe. Now, whenever they talk, they reaffirm the fact that you've already recovered and that they're still living with the echoes of your absence. That is karma's poetry. They took on the role of defender of the name they wished to eradicate. 10th, you arouse their yearning for significance. For some, the only proof that they ever mattered is your very existence. It hurts when they hear your name. It tells them that your tale continued without them, not because they despise you. You turned into a time marker and a living reminder that they were once a part of something significant. You no longer feel important now that you've moved on. They also have no idea how to live without it. In order to survive the increasing emptiness that comes with irrelevance, they talk about you rather than to attack. Their response isn't arbitrary. It comes naturally. There is a gap in the identity of the person who defined themselves through you when you outgrow them. Without the conflict, the back and forth, and your attention boosting their self-esteem, they have no idea who they are. Unconsciously, you try to feel alive every time your name is spoken. Without it, they would have to confront how invisible they have become. Therefore, they utter your name as if it were a lifeline. They're not really after you deep down. It's the affirmation you once offered. Since it was more than just a connection, they are unable to replicate that energy with anyone else. It has to do with meaning. You served as a mirror that gave them a sense of significance. They feel like a supporting character in their own story now that you're gone. Your name is still on their lips because of this. They can only demonstrate to themselves and others that they were previously important in the lives of those who have risen above them in this way. And that's what makes your growth so painfully beautiful. It reveals the people who only saw value in your fragility. You no longer require their consent, and you subtly destroy their sense of significance in the process. The pain of that understanding is increased each time your name appears. They talk about you because if they didn't, they would have to acknowledge that they've faded into the past and that you've proven to be meaningless in a world that no longer requires their approval. Number 11, they continue to speak because they believe that self-reflection would be forced by quiet. Some individuals can't stop talking about you because they don't want to confront the truth if they don't speak. Every time your name is spoken, it serves as a shield, a diversion, and a means of avoiding introspection. If they let themselves remain silent, they would have to acknowledge that their own shortcomings, fears, and unresolved resentment were the true cause of the problem, not you. It requires bravery, hard work, and humility to face the reality. Furthermore, for a lot of people, continuing to talk is simpler than completely rebuilding themselves. Their fixation turns into a ritual of protection. They avoid facing the unpleasant realities of their decisions, mistakes, and lost opportunities by focusing all of their attention on you. Every rumor, gossip, and grievance serves as a makeshift bandage for a wound they won't admit exists. In an effort to stay in control, they fabricate memories and resurrect past grievances. By doing this, instead of accepting accountability for the turmoil in their own life, they externalize blame and maintain the focus on you. The irony is obvious. It becomes increasingly clear that their life is out of balance the more they talk. While attempting to project a sense of superiority and righteousness, their remarks betray impatience, jealousy, and insecurity. They talk about you because their minds are too weak to cope with the reflection of your absence, not because you provide them with good distractions. The fact that the true conflict isn't with you is demonstrated by every statement made about you. They're with themselves. In contrast, you live in silence, unburdened by their fixation. Your disinterest draws attention to their internal conflict and intensifies the volume, franticness, and revelation of their talk. They can talk all they want, but it won't make a difference in your life. Their voice turns into a mirror that reflects their own shortcomings and reveals how constantly discussing you is really a confession of their own unresolved issues. Their silence would be the remedy which they refuse to accept, and their words are their punishment. Number 12. They're recording their fall, but they believe they're exposing you. They expose more about their true selves the more they talk about you. They think they're correcting the record, revealing your shortcomings and damaging your reputation. In actuality, however, they are documenting their own demise. Every word they say becomes a timestamp in their emotional journal, which is filled with jealousy, denial, and resentment rather than reality. Slowly, the tale they believe they are presenting about you turns into a memoir of their own insecurities. People become aware. Listeners may initially sympathize with them and accept their version of events, but the pattern becomes apparent with time. You remain quiet, you proceed, you develop. Even when no one asks, they can't quit talking about you. They become more acerbic. Their tales were more dramatic, their arguments less compelling. It sounds more like obsession than it does like the reality. What was supposed to be evidence of your wrongdoings turns out to be evidence of their dissolution. They're making an unwitting confession every time they talk about you. They show you how much effort they have put into maintaining your reputation. They reveal how much your absence annoys them. Their resentment permeates every aspect, and the world hears the same thing, regardless of how hard they try to hide it. Anguish that never went away. Their attempt to draw attention to you only serves to highlight their own weaknesses. It takes time for the decrease to occur. Credibility, dignity, and tranquility are being gradually undermined. They are believed less the more they talk. Their image gets smaller the more they attempt to ruin yours. And it's already too late when they discover that everyone has stopped listening for your name and has begun examining their actions. They believed they were writing your collapse tale, so they have meticulously crafted their own. The conclusion they desired for you became their own, and what they referred to as exposure was actually self-exposure. 13. They confused happenstance with spiritual consequences. Most individuals don't realize that the cosmos has a subtle order, a steady balance that never falters. Someone may believe they are getting away with lying about you, slandering your name, or attempting to damage your reputation on a regular basis. They chuckle, they boast, they feel indestructible. However, as time passes, their lives begin to slow down. Once easy to open doors now stick. Relationships break down. They lose out on opportunities, their energy stagnates, and they attribute these things to bad luck, timing, or people turning against them, but in reality they are dealing with spiritual consequences. Their ego prevents them from seeing the connection, so they see that gradual unraveling as a coincidence. They are unable to understand the consequences of criticizing someone who is under heavenly protection. Every deceptive statement, deceptive behavior, and trivial effort to distort the facts turns into a seed against them. There is no spiteful punishment from the cosmos. It just reflects what you emit. They cursed their own flow as they attempted to curse you. They obstructed their own route as they attempted to block you. The energy does the fighting for the selected ones, so they don't have to. What was intended to cause damage becomes proof of divine alignment. You continue to be blessed, protected, and making progress. They're questioning why nothing seems to be moving forward as they keep running into imaginary walls. Karma isn't being harsh in that way. Unbalance is being corrected by the truth. If you want your blessings to grow, you can't pollute the soil. Nevertheless, they will never be able to recognize it for what it is. Pride prevents people from seeing that poor decisions weren't the first thing that led to their demise. It started out badly. Because it is simpler to deny divine order than to acknowledge guilt, they mistakenly believe that consequence was a coincidence. However, the universe always pays off the loan and keeps score in a discreet manner. What they spoke against you came back to haunt them, and what they intended to destroy just made you more secure. 14. You live rent-free because you stand for untouchable freedom. They still care, which is why they don't mention you. You are the embodiment of everything they will never have the guts to become, which is why they talk about you. They cannot express the ways in which your freedom burns them. You liberated yourself from their hold, their sway, and their manipulation of your emotions, and you thrived without their praise rather than collapsing. Those who rely on control to feel safe are terrified of that kind of freedom. Your tranquility, which they derided, has now become their passion since you quit following their rules. They think you're rent-free because you're evidence that manipulation is ineffective. You didn't simply leave once awareness took over. You disrupted their survival mechanism. How you achieved it is beyond their comprehension. How to wake up each day without letting their viewpoint influence your choices. How can you remain composed when they're still agitated? They reenact your decisions because they are learning what freedom looks like, not because they miss you. They are unable to touch it without destroying the illusion they have created for themselves. Their turmoil is insulted by your tranquility. Their need is revealed by your disengagement. They perpetuate your name in an attempt to twist your tale, but they secretly find it fascinating that you accomplished what they were unable to. Give yourself up totally, and for that reason you will always be in their thoughts. You are more than a recollection. You serve as a reminder of an alternative world, one in which peace and self-respect prevail over ego conflicts and power struggles. Since silence would be interpreted as acquiescence, they are unable to stop talking. Additionally, acknowledging your release would entail acknowledging their continued captivity. In an attempt to make sense of something they will never be able to experience themselves, they continue to run their mouths. They don't choose to be obsessed with you. You are their evidence that power was never control. It was freedom. And they will never be able to possess that one item, regardless of the number of times they mention your name. In conclusion, there is a fact that most people are unwilling to acknowledge at the heart of every passion, whispered tale, and repeated name. The issue is never the one they discuss. They were unable to look into the mirror because you, the chosen one, broke the illusions they had created about themselves. Their fears, failures, and the aspects of themselves they have refused to mend are reflected in every word they say, rumor they spread, and desperate attempt to dominate your story. Your distance and silence are not signs of weakness, they are discoveries. The flaws in their foundation are revealed by your development, tranquility, and independence. Additionally, the difference between a life spent in fear and one lived with purpose is highlighted by your very presence. They are actually recording their own disintegration, even though they believe they are exposing you. They think they can restore authority by repeatedly saying your name. However, they just expose their ego's hollowness, obsession, resentment, and jealousy. It all comes down to the reality that you have changed, grown, and taken back what they were never able to comprehend. Real freedom. As you continue to soar above their instability, every attempt to control your tale becomes proof of their spiritual, emotional, and psychological stagnation. This is where the ultimate paradox is found. It becomes more evident that their energy cannot dominate you the louder they attempt to dictate your story. You are untouchable because you live in accordance with your truth, not because you quarrel or fight. Your message is your life. Your power lies in your tranquility. They are still ensnared in a world from which they will never be able to leave, as evidenced by the very obsession they feed. A world in which you are free and others are still trapped in their own unsolved problems. Remember to subscribe to the channel for more in-depth insights. If this has struck a chord with you, if it has empowered you, provided you with clarity, or awakened you to your own serenity and growth, add this video with anyone who needs to hear the truth about people who can't stop talking about them. Hit the like button and add your thoughts in the comment section. Be strong. Remain untouchable. Additionally, allow your life to continue speaking louder than any fixation ever could.